Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar on segmentation for all occasions. We're so glad you're here let's just jump right in. So for introductions today is myself. I'm Ron. I'm a retired Navy veteran, a qualified security assessor for PCI, a SWIFT assessor, and also a registered practitioner for the CMMC program. And I have experiences across the globe on multiple industries and, as you can see, multiple frameworks. With me today is Rene. She's a retired police officer, is also our registered practitioner for CMMC and our subject matter expert. She's also one of our assessors for SWIFT and has certifications in ISO 27001 audits as well as her CISSP. And today, going into the housekeeping. Housekeeping for participants, your mics and cameras are turned off. So just enjoy the presentation. We are doing something a little different. We don't have a dedicated Q&A at the end. So if you've got questions, use the Q&A button at the top to ask, and we'll try to get those answered as we can. And if we don't get them during the presentation, we will respond to you separately after the presentation. And of course, now grab a cup of coffee to enjoy the time and turn off your phones or put it in do not disturb. So today's agenda, Rene is going to start us off with some definitions and segment types. And then I'm going to spend a few minutes on, why segment and the scope. And then Rene will finish us off with the benefits and challenges of those sessions. Again, as you have questions through the presentation, just put them in the Q&A and we'll try to address those. With that, let's get Rene on here to get us started.
Segmentation is the method of dividing a large network into smaller segments and applying different security configurations to each segment, depending on the function of that particular segment. Think of it as a candy store. Each container has a certain type of candy in it. By adding tamper-proof lids, kids can't open the containers that they are not allowed to open. You could also put some high-end candy in a locked cabinet. Segmentation is everywhere, even in our own homes. Physical segmentation involves dividing a larger network into a collection of smaller subnets. A physical or virtual firewall acts as a gateway. It controls the traffic coming in and going out. Physical segmentation is relatively straightforward to adopt, as the division lies in the architecture. To successfully implement physical segmentation, you would use routers, firewalls, or other physical devices. Logical segmentation is software-based and makes use of subnetting and network addressing to accomplish the segmentation. Logical segmentation is a more flexible option. Because logical segmentation does not involve moving hardware around to accomplish the segmentation, it is also more cost-effective and less time-consuming.
Thank you, Rene. We can get into the next slide. So why segment? Really segmentation involves the implementation of additional controls for separate systems with different security needs. We do it out of necessity. There are three common situations where there are different levels of security. Credit card information protection required for the PCI DSS program is one of them. Operational or OT, ICS or industrial controls are also used in a wide range for manufacturing, critical infrastructure. And for those in the medical industry, medical devices for hospitals would be another form of OCS or OT and ICS. Government documents for contracting, so there's federal contract information or controlled unclassified information, that's FCI and CUI, those fall under the CMMC or the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. So there's really multiple reasons why you want to segment to keep your information really protected, in a different fashion. And I will say that as we go into the scope, you know, I actually had the opportunity to join one of our um, in uh, PCI forensics investigations, and for an organization that had been breached. And in the breach, what we saw was that the bad actors were as in every part of the network, except the segmented stuff that had payment information, and they were a PCI client. So at the end, they didn't have to report a breach of payment information or credit card data, but they really had to just only address the wider scale um, network operations, in general. So in scope systems and people. So to achieve segmentation, we have to understand what people and systems are part of the area protected in the program. Now today we're focusing on the system segmentation, but understand what is in scope is just as important for the people aspects of it. So what is in scope or scoping? Now determining what systems process, transmit, or store the protected information, or if it has an effect on security. These are the systems that are really considered in scope. If the people that are operating those systems, the people that actually have the access to the information itself, they're also in scope. Um, but we'll talk about the people aspects in a deeper level going forward. So how do we determine scope? Determining scope starts with information flow. Information flow can be the data or the control signals, specifically when it comes to things like OCS and or OT and ICS. Man, I just really want to mix those up today. So where and how does the data enter the network? Um, Credit cards, it could be by swipe, it could be entering the information, it could be e-commerce. And some of the information is, you know, when it comes to operational technology, it's built into the system, at inception. Implementation says, here is the design, here is the PLCs, here are the units that we're actually controlling throughout the network, right? So any sex system that does the function that we just really discussed from the process transmit store, those are um, they are directly in scope, right? It makes sense, right? If we are processing credit card data, if it is a server that is controlling uh, systems for operational technology, if it's actually CUI information, those systems are clearly in scope. But what is, but really the next part is, and this is the harder piece that sometimes that challenges organizations, is what is a connected to system? So any system that helps protect um, the information or the support systems that directly process or transmit. So for example, firewalls, backup systems, DHCP servers are those kind of systems. So if it's not one of those two, if it's not connected to, if it's not affecting the security, if it's not actually processing the information, then it is in fact out of scope. And so how do we start with that piece and understanding what that is? And so we're just going to go over a little bit of diagrams. I will say these are very basic in nature, but hopefully these will provide some conceptual ideas of what is next for your organization. And so you see this basic diagram. We have a corporate network. It's got a DMZ. Even though there's not really any servers shown in the DMZ, this is like where your web servers would go, that are publicly facing, if you're hosting those in-house for you. I think so many organizations now are using separate web hosting services, and so you may or may not have a web server in here, but anything that's publicly facing would come through your DMZ. And then next, I really will add the shared services. Now, small businesses, sometimes they don't really take the time to document this kind of layout from a shared services perspective, right? So you can see what we have is a patch server. If you're doing patch servers, direct, in-house on-prem, understanding there's a lot of patch serving that goes on from the cloud, and this, and we'll look at that in just a second. Backup, log monitoring and system monitoring. And these are systems that really are providing support for your entire corporate network. And so really keep this administrative set of systems separate from your corporate network, from a firewall perspective. And so, starting with that particular detail, what do we do with the next system, right? And so here we're going to add a little enclave. We're calling it the protective enclave. Um, Depends on which one you have, and it may not even be one. So really understand that it could be that you could have one of these for PCI. You could have one for HIPAA. You could have one for uh, OCS or ICS OT. Man, it is getting me today. Um, and so you could have more than one of these. And so you'll see really in this segment, right, is you've got databases, applications. Um, you may even have just the ICS OT servers that are conducting these critical operations and the workstations that with them. So you will see that while this has got a nice, pretty gold workstation in it, so these workstations would be separate from your everyday workstations um, that are in your corporate network. And so this is everything in this particular segment is in scope, and it is the systems that directly process, transmit, store information. So also in scope are we're going back to the shared services, and so the shared services, because they affect security, because they're the ones that have the backups, they're the ones that allow business continuity and disaster recovery. These all become a part of in-scope systems for whatever the enclave is. Now, if you're having some thoughts of, oh, I do really have more than one protected system, because we have credit cards and we have ICSOT, then you understand that you'll have to get into an advanced level of whatever controls you put in place for your shared services are equal among the two compliance or cybersecurity frameworks. And so the next piece is, of course, today organizations don't live in isolation. I would say majority of organizations are using Microsoft 365 or they're using Google Workspaces as their standard production. We have seen that cyber insurance is pushing, especially on the Microsoft Exchange side, that you're using really Exchange online with Microsoft 365 to help make sure that software in the Exchange server is maintaining its security. And so these three boxes here on the left that you'll see, right, is that we've we've got cloud services like Azure. It's got your identity and access management pieces. Many organizations are using managed service providers. And then there are other subcontractors for doing processing of some of the CUI for information for CMMC. It could be a third party service provider doing payment information. And so this is an area where you get into this, like, okay, overall as an organization, you're accountable for the protection of the information, the data, and the operations. Um, However, you will, use these third-party service providers in such a way that they're going to help process, transmit, store. They're going to help with the security of, right? And so these three boxes really provide that kind of example. And so they are responsible. And so it's very important to understand what is their responsibilities, but overall, your organization is a part of the accountability, and it never loses accountability. So um, we've often seen in organizations that, oh, I don't have PCI because I have a third party service provider. And in fact, if you have PCI and you have a third party service provider, you still have PCI. You're always accountable for that. Um, in the case to pick on the credit card piece of it, right, is that the acquiring bank that's helped you set up your services as a merchant. If there is a breach, they're coming for your organization. They're not going to the third-party service provider. The third-party service provider, is accountable to you. And so this really puts this in scope um, for your organization. Um, and so you see the three boxes here of how do you protect these particular elements. Understanding that while I'm not going to show data flows in these particular in the diagram, understanding that information that flows, so data that is transmitted securely. That'll be a part of all frameworks, and understanding that each end, regardless of where it's at, if it's software as a service in the cloud, providing some kind of services, that these three elements really help define what is in scope. And so when I when I talked about understanding the flow of information, where does it start? If it's in e-commerce, and I talked about websites being in the DMZ, but of course on the back end of that, it would have a secure connection to the database that holds cardholder data. Cardholder data also ultimately ends up going to the bank for approvals. And so you have to understand what that flow is. It starts with a website. It starts with card presence. Um, if it is OCS, right, it is actually maybe contained, but if you have some requirement and to operate the systems remotely, then you've got to take that time and really look at what that data flow is. So that's the affecting the security of, so that you can control your ICS type systems. And so that flow is a part of understanding the segmentation and controlling that in such a way that you can do that. And then of course there's again another just kind of an advanced moment that I'll say exists, right, is so how do you isolate these systems in the big red box, and then still access them at the same time. And so there's typically the term is jump boxes, and so you use other avenues where you can the jump box gets to be a connected to system, and then you can talk to the jump box, and then the jump box, um, you can only have communications, right? So this would be remote desktop, this would be SSH, it would be PowerShell, some kind of mechanism to talk to a jump server, and then the jump server has access to the information that's really required to make sure that any of the services required from the business aspect of in the protected enclave are handled. And so understand we're not going to go too deep into what is a jump server, but jump servers are a very important aspect of keeping a protected enclave protected. And so as Rene mentioned, subnets and virtual LANs, and you really want to talk about that aspect, right? Is that so logical segmentation, right? Is that it really, if it's got a separate VLAN, it means okay, we're separate VLAN, but it also means part of the controls is you cannot have communications between your corporate network and your protected network. And so what does that look like? Is that a combination of physical, everything go through smart switches, and we know which switch can physically or logically turn off one physical port on the switch or not. Is there a firewall that says, hey, VLAN 1 can talk to VLAN 2, but it's only on a particular service such as HTTPS on port 443, or something that other aspects, right? So it's not as simple as saying, hey, I've got a VLAN, but it's a VLAN, and then still do we have some kind of controls whitelisting through the routers, or another way, and approved connection list of, hey, these two boxes can talk to one another, and then sharing the communications again is both in a secure protocol. And so these are elements of how do you ensure those protected. We're really just talking about, hey, understanding what your data is, how does it flow through, based on the flow, what systems are in scope. And so just because there's a secure transmission, but say between the database of this protected enclave and your MSP doesn't mean to put the corporate network. It just means that you have to ensure as an organization that the information starts with encryption in the protected enclave and then ends with decryption at the MSP level, and everything in between, such as the internet and the cloud on the left, are not a part of that. Um, really are really a part of being able to see or access that information, and that's what keeps it segmented. If you think it really the other way around, you can say, okay, our corporate network is segmented from any of the protected zones. And so with that, let me switch over to Rene, and she will talk to us about the benefits.
The benefits of segmentation is that it enhances user experience. Improving network performance will keep users happier as their speeds will increase and server lag will be minimized. You have better security. Security improves when segmentation is implemented. Should a bad actor gain entry into a segment, the attack can be contained in one segment rather than it impacting the whole network. An example is a compartment in a submarine. When one part gets flooded, the compartment is sealed off, and this ensures that the rest of the submarine stays dry. It minimizes outages. Using segmentation could protect the network from downtime due to technical issues. If one segment is down, it is limited to that segment, sparing the rest of the network. The example of the submarine works in this case as well. You can control access. By segmenting parts of the network, guests cannot get access to segments they are not authorized to see. You could restrict certain groups of people and allow others, making for a more secure network. The first challenge that comes to light when dealing with segmentation is the balance between keeping it simple and the segmentation requirements that can quickly become very complex. Having a segmented network means that it needs to be managed. The key here is to not overburden the IT staff with excessive segmentation requirements, but still have an effective segmentation strategy to protect the company. Designing the network segmentation in such a way that it allows for scalability and growth in each segment can be challenging, especially when attempting to segment an environment that features devices from multiple vendors. Workloads and IP addresses are dynamic, and changes happen constantly. Because of this dynamic nature, it is difficult to build network segmentation policies that stay relevant. Appliance-based firewalls just always can't keep up with the changes. The chance of misconfiguring a security policy during implementation is high because of network architecture complexity. This margin of error becomes more significant when the organization does not control the network infrastructure, such as a hybrid, cloud, or virtual environment. Ron, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. And those are most important parts about the benefits, of course, and then understanding that Renee much more eloquently talked about what the challenges are, right? So we appreciate everybody's time. We're about at the 24-minute mark, and so we'll do our wrap up now, right? Is why segment, right? It is just a reminder. It's protecting critical operations or data. So you're protecting that sensitive data regardless if it's under CMMC, PCI, but there's many more. I mean, there's credit information. As well. There's, we mentioned Swift, which is really for wire transfers. And so there's many reasons. Start with your data flows. Understand, where does the data start? Where does the data end? And sometimes the end is it goes somewhere else, and some points that it stays retained, and some points it is both. And so you understand that how is the data going to be used at the other end, and at what point does that data become the accountability of the other organization as opposed to your organization, and how do you get rid of that information? With that, we hope you've had, I hope this a few minutes has been an enlightening, just some thoughts on what is segmentation, why do you do it. But if you'd like to know more, please visit our website and see what some of our services is, and then you'll see on the website there is time to book a meeting with our team, and then we can really open a discussion. So visit our website today. With that, thank you very much. We hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and we will see you again.